So can I just say thank you so much for joining us. This is all part of my commitment to be available to citizens across the West Midlands. Had it not, of course, been for the COVID restrictions, we'd be doing this face-to-face. I've done a number of these across the borough. Indeed, the very first one of these I did back in 2016 was at the West Warwickshire Club in Alton. And I've been to Shirley, to Solihull, to Knowle, you name it. So very keen to do this evening in this different way. The fun of it is always the spontaneity. I don't know what questions are going to be asked. It's down to you. All I can commit is to give you my honest answer. If I don't know, I'll say. If it's someone else's responsibility, I'll say, but perhaps try to influence it. And it's one other commitment. It's all to be done in 1 hour. An hour of politics, particularly on a lovely spring evening, is more than enough for anybody. So if we should improvise then, I can't actually see the questions. So if anyone has got a question, if you would like to put it in the chat, then my technical assistant, Ollie from Birmingham Updates, who works with us on all of this, will actually ask me the question. So if anyone's got a question, pop it in the chat and then Ollie will read it out. And I'm sorry that we are having to improvise in this way till Julian is able to join us on the line. So Ollie, has anyone put a question in the chat for us?
Yes, we have one. So Andy, it's of course imperative that we protect as much of our precious greenbelt as we can. And here in Solihull, we have significant greenbelt area of land. What have you been doing to protect it?
Yeah, so I know this issue is an acute issue in Solihull, and actually more in the Meriden constituency than in the Solihull parliamentary constituency, certainly across Solihull as a whole. So let's be really clear. I have given an absolute categoric reassurance that my policy is what we call brownfield first. And let me just explain how this is relevant to Solihull, because I'm sure lots of people will say, well, Andy, there's very little brownfield sites in Solihull. How is that relevant? So let me explain. First of all, we have to build the new homes that the West Midlands needs. The number that we're looking for is 215,000 homes by 2031. It is a vast number, bigger than anywhere else outside London. But we can do that by building on derelict industrial land and land that has already been used, but is not necessarily derelict. And we protect the Greenbelt. And we've actually done that. Over the last 5 years, we've doubled the number of homes being built in the West Midlands from about 8,000 a year to 17,000 a year in each of the last 2 years. So that puts us on track. And we've done that on brownfield. And the way I personally have been able to contribute to that has been to secure from government over £450 million that we then use in the combined authority with individual developers to sort of clean up the sites that they are then going to redevelop. And the list of sites that we've done is very, very long now across the whole of the West Midlands. But if you come to Solihull, the critical factor is the more that other boroughs, whether it be particularly Birmingham, build on their brownfield sites means they do not have to ask Solihull to take their overflow. And that's what's been happening. And what we're also doing in Solihull is we're making sure we put as much development as is humanly possible on the existing developed areas, whether it's the town centre, whether it is the NEC, or whether it's the Arden Cross development, which I know is not yet developed, but the area around the interchange station. And by maximising the development there, we take the pressure off the Greenbelt. Now, last thing to say, and if there's a question you want to come back, please do, because I know this is a vexed issue in Solihull. Despite all that progress, the only way that Solihull can meet its needs currently is to take some Greenbelt in its next local plan. I would dearly like that was not the case. I would dearly like that we've been able to find more alternative sites. But at the moment, Solihull, the only way the council can meet their target is to take some, but they've obviously tried to minimise that. So if you look in the area around South Shirley, Walsall Common, they've reduced what's taken from the first plan that they consulted on. And obviously the brownfield first elsewhere is a big contributor to that. So sorry, that's quite a long answer, but I know it's a very contentious issue in Solihull.
Excellent. And we should now have Julian on the call.
Yeah, I'm here. Apologies. My internet decided to stop working at that particular moment, just as I was logging in. So anyway, delighted to hear. I heard the Greenbelt question and the answer to, and I'm going to put a next question to you, Andy, if that's okay.
With pleasure. Very nice to see you, Julian.
Nice to see you as well, Andy.
I was wondering how we were going to do if you couldn't get on. So there we go. Brilliant. Yeah.
Well, glories of Zoom. Andy, you have been an advocate for HS2 and the benefits that will bring to Solihull and the wider West Midlands region. Can you expand upon what you think these benefits will be?
Yes, with pleasure. And I know two very controversial questions right at the beginning. So, yeah, I was a big advocate for HS2, and I actually am very proud of the fact that I thought it was the right job for the mayor to do, to actually get out there and lead the campaign for HS2. And some say that I persuaded government ministers when some of them were perhaps sitting on the fence, you could say. And I think it will be really important to the West Midlands. So let me explain. The immediate advantage of it is, of course, about jobs. And there are already 12,000 jobs in the construction of HS2. And literally, I was with a company in Solihull only yesterday on Cranwell Boulevard, who are currently recruiting 750 people for jobs in the building of HS2. And we're really working hard to make sure at this critical time, as many local jobs come and as many SMEs, small businesses, get contracts to build it. And the lovely stat is already 96 businesses across Solihull have got contracts for the building of that railway. So all that's immediate. But the longer term benefit, which is the one that really led me to support it, was it will put Solihull Underground Interchange Station right at the centre of the UK's public transport infrastructure that will probably last for the next 100 years, just like the Victorian railways did. And that has got to be an enormous economic asset. It makes you are the best connected place in the whole country. And we will see inward investment coming on the back of that, because people want to be where they can get to all these markets very quickly. So the projections, not done by me, but done by national government, is that actually the West Midlands will be the big beneficiary of HS2. And that's why I wanted to get behind it. And if you just look already around Curzon Street, you see the diggers in the ground for the investments coming in around the city centre. Of course, interchange is taking a bit longer, but we've just had the news from the government that they're committed to fund us by a further £50 million to do all the enabling works there. And we're very, very confident that we will build at that site some really cutting edge businesses because of its superb connectivity.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Next question relates to the town centre plan in Solihull, the master plan.
Yes.
Which has recently been outlined by Solihull Council. Andy, what are your thoughts on this plan? And more broadly, what are your thoughts on the direction the town centre, Solihull town centre, is taking?
Yeah. So the nice thing here is that the council leader, Julian, and myself did a photograph just before Christmas. So there are witnesses to the fact we're all in this together. Because actually, I think it is exactly right that the council step forward with a master plan. Let's just reflect. It's an odd way of answering the question, but I'll explain this. This morning, I did a call with businesses in Sutton Coldfield. And whenever I do a call with businesses in Sutton Coldfield, I get, why can't our town centre be like Solihull? The truth of the matter is that Solihull Council have done a brilliant job over the last 20 years to make something of your town centre. And lots of other councils around the region stand in sort of admiration. And if I'm very honest, John Lewis's decision to move into Solihull, and of course now it's the only John Lewis shop in the whole region, was because of the vision that Solihull Council with Lend-Lease saw for Touchwood. So you've got something that others would give a great deal for. But the critical point in retail is if you stand still, it will actually erode. So what Solihull Council are saying is we've got to go again. We've got to think about what the town centre is going to be over the next 20 years. And it isn't going to be more retail. And frankly, I'm pleased that Touchwood didn't get extended, but it is probably going to be really brilliant residential in the town centre. And if all the rumours about great residential on the sort of Mel Square site come to be true, that will really help in the local plan, back to the Greenbelt. And of course, if there's really first-class office space, there's really first-class leisure facilities, there's really first-class public services, all there in the town centre with great public transport linking it in, I honestly think we can continue to make Solihull town centre play a vast part in the economic dynamo that is Solihull. And so the council are right to think genuinely deeply again And by the way, if that involves moving the council offices from that sort of wonderful location that could be so much more, that's also a very brave thing to do. So actually, I want to get right behind it with Julian and with the council.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And obviously the station as well, and the idea of maybe a relocation there. And it is music to my ears, I have to say, to hear anyone say that Sutton Coldfield are saying that they envy Solihull. So I'll remind the member for the Royal Borough very shortly. The Royal Town, sorry. It's not its own borough. Obviously, we're having a really difficult time economically, everyone at the moment, and to a certain extent, it's been disguised by the government's world-leading furlough scheme and how they have supported individual businesses locally and nationally. What do you think in terms of how we come out of this, and what regional actions are you looking to take on jobs and investment so that we can really supercharge the recovery as we come out of this dreadful pandemic?
Yeah, I'll come to that question in just one second, Jim, but I'm going to be ever so naughty, because what you said about Sutton not being its own borough, there was something really, really important in that line. And it's actually directly relevant to the mayoral situation as well. The good people of Sutton, when looking at Solihull enviously, actually always talk about the fact they're part of Birmingham. And Birmingham has not developed Sutton in the way in which Solihull Council has developed Solihull. And what I try very hard to do as mayor is think about all the non-Birmingham areas. And what I genuinely think would be a disaster for Solihull would be a Birmingham-centric mayor telling Solihull what to do. And I know it's something you feel very strongly as well, Julian. So I hope you don't mind me just going down that little tangent, because just in your line, there was something so important for those on the line just to think about in a sense. Yeah. So anyway, let's get to your question. So this is perhaps the most important question of all, the economic future. Just let me give you two stats that will sort of show, or three stats, sorry, that will show you the picture. In the years up to COVID, the West Midlands was doing really well. Solihull was doing the best of everywhere in the West Midlands, but the West Midlands economy was growing faster than anywhere outside London. And we created 97,000 jobs in 3 years. That's going some. In COVID, the increase in people claiming benefits is 95,000. So all the progress of 3 years is lost in COVID. So the really big question for the next mayor is, how are we going to grow back rapidly? And what I've put together, and perhaps the moderator would pop it in the chat box if anyone wants to look at the detail, is what I call my jobs plan, because the jobs is the big challenge. And it talks about 100,000 jobs in just 2 years. So that would be the most rapid growth we've ever seen. And it's all things which we can see right now. It's not fantasy, but if the government would give us a load of money, we'd be able to do this. It's what we can see right now. And I'd call just three things out. First of all, of course, it's making sure those things that we've already got rebound as quickly as possible. And everything the Chancellor has done is really important to that. That will help. Jobs in hospitality will come back. Secondly, it's obviously making sure the big wins that we've had over recent years, they deliver jobs as quickly as possible. We've talked about HS2, 7,000 jobs, Commonwealth Games. The target there is 40,000 jobs, not all long term, but that's really incredibly fortuitous timing for us, and we worked for that. And then areas, of course, like all the transport investment we're making across the West Midlands, that will bring jobs. But then the other really important bit of it is, where are the new jobs, which are the new growth areas? And just a couple to call out what we're doing to try to make sure that we become the centre of this electric automotive industry. So important for JLR, and of course, that's so important for Solihull. And the work we're doing to secure this Gigafactory, the battery factory, will become the sort of heartbeat of the electric automotive industry. We're talking about 4,000 jobs there. And then, of course, the whole digital and tech sector, that continues to grow very fast. And that's why we're offering opportunities for people to be retrained in digital skills to move into that sector as quickly as possible. So there's lots of ingredients in it, Julian, but critically, we're trying to say 100,000 jobs. We can see them. We want to get people into them as soon as possible. I think you just muted, Julian.
Yeah, I'm so used to telling people not to unmute, and then I do it myself. It's typical, isn't it? Look, I'm about to go to another question, but just briefly, when you talked about these sort of highly skilled jobs, there's something which is really has happened in the last couple of weeks, which I think we really need to bang the drum about in the West Midlands, and that is the BBC investment into the West Midlands. I was talking to their regional director just a couple of hours ago. It's incredibly exciting, particularly when it comes to their scheme for apprenticeships. 500 apprenticeships, but not just apprenticeships to the BBC, but apprenticeships for the whole ecosystem of TV production, online production, radio production in the West Midlands, which I think will have an enormous effect and is a factor of 7 times more than Channel 4 have placed into Leeds. I just whether or not you think that that's just an indication of the way in which we've got to try and diversify away from our traditional strengths and really sort of make the most of our young population in the West Midlands and our really diverse population. Andy?
Yeah, no, Julian, thank you. I think it's actually a brilliant point. Let's be honest, the BBC perhaps hadn't invested here what they should have done over recent years. You've been very vociferous on that, so have I. And I hope people on the line won't mind me telling a little bit of the story here. When the new Director General of the BBC was appointed, and I know Julian was in his ear, but it is true that I'd never met him before, but I made contact with him and I said, Tim Davey, his name, he's a very informal man, so he wouldn't mind me saying it that way. I said, Tim, you've never met me, but we're going to do some business because actually you're the new man in charge. We need further investment from the BBC. And it was a delight that 3 weeks ago, they talked about new production here, moving news channels here. And of course, as you say, their academy being based here as well. And I think it is really symbolic, but more than symbolic, it's actually going to be like a sort of dynamo because other investors in the creative industries will come round it. And one thing that persuaded them, of course, was the work we've been doing to have a new film studio in the Digbeth area of Birmingham. So it's a classic piece of evidence. If you get a bit of one thing going, something else follows on. And I think we're building some real critical mass in that sector now. So I feel really optimistic. And it does mean we've got another string to our economic bow, just as you say.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andy. Next question is from Bill. He says that you do an excellent job for business. That's a nice start to a question, isn't it?
There's a
and development. Yeah, the 5 is in the post. But I would appreciate if you talked a little bit more about people. So how do you relate effectively that business and development? And obviously you're a business person. Everyone knows your background. But how do you relate that to people's lived experiences? I think that's the point Bill was trying to get across.
Yeah, very interesting question. Okay, they are one and the same thing, actually. So let's just think about my business career. So I led John Lewis. We know that John Lewis is a different type of business. It's owned by its employees. It exists solely for the happiness of its employees. That's the raison d'etre. It's not about profit at all. It's actually happiness of its employees. And I was accountable only to my employees, not to the shareholders at all. So, Bill, what I learned in that good business is only there for what it does for its employees, but also obviously its customers, its suppliers, but for everybody in that human chain. So I'm a firm believer that the way you improve the lot of people is by actually giving them the opportunity for really good, sustainable jobs. And obviously that's what business and other organizations provide. So if it comes across as a business mindset, in a sense, that's probably a fair comment. But actually what underlies that is actually it's through that individuals get the opportunities to improve themselves.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Teresa Kabala. I think the context of this is, of course, obviously in your previous mayoral race, we had Sean Simon, who was the Labour candidate, stating that he wanted to effectively build right across Solihull's Greenbelt in order to have overspill from other parts of the West Midlands. Yeah. And he actually made it a sort of campaigning issue. And you stated at that time that you wanted brownfield first, and that effectively you wanted to try and protect the Greenbelt as much as possible, which I think was something that really sort of made resonance with people in Solihull. But Teresa asked that basically Robert Jenrick has stated that more homes will have to be built in greenfield sites. Does this not conflict with the government's assertion that we'll oppose urban sprawl to protect the environment? And it's against your policy. So are you against government policy in that respect?
Yeah, so let's be clear. I have had some very difficult conversations with the government about this. And I hope let's just go to a very specific example of this, first of all, to prove that. Just a few months ago, we were facing a situation in Solihull where the government were proposing increase in, it's a ghastly word, what they called the algorithm of how many homes were going to be built. And it was increasing the annual sum from about 800 to about 1,200. It was a swipe of a pen by a civil servant in Whitehall. And I was with our MPs, Julian and Saki, vociferous, and both publicly and also privately in the ear of ministers, because that's how it's done when it's your own party, by the way, to say this is all wrong. And the brilliant news is they ripped up the proposal and we're back to the original numbers for Solihull. Now, the next part of this debate is actually where, again, I've written my formal response to their planning consultation. I do not believe that their defence of the Greenbelt is strong enough. They still allow in their proposals developers to come for proposals to, frankly, change the designation of Greenbelt. My own view, and this particularly applies in the Meriden Gap, given how important it is as that green lung between Birmingham and Coventry, is that something is designated Greenbelt, that should be it. It should almost be like a national park status that is not going to be built on. And that is a very live conversation that I'm having with the ministers in the housing department at the moment about how we can strengthen that. So I suppose, Teresa, the straight answer to the question is yes, I am somewhat at odds with my party because I do not believe they are being tough enough in this defence of our green spaces.
Do you think as well, just to as a follow-up from myself, that it is really important that if you do develop in this way, that you do so with a more than one eye, in fact, on environmentalism, on the environment that you create, the green spaces that you create within those developments. There is a world of difference for our environment between a well-planned, well-thought-out development with correct in terms of the water table, everything else like that, so not in terms of flooding, to prevent flooding. And what has occurred quite often in the past, where effectively the developer could just basically do what it wants, throw it up, get it done, get out, make its money, sometimes leaving residents without broadband and correct broadband, which is an absolute outrage in my view. Is it also, as regional mayor, and I know this is often a local council issue, but would you intend to try and bang the drum to ensure that when there are new developments, they're done in a way which is environmentally incredibly sympathetic and as carbon neutral as possible?
Yeah, categorically, yes. So two things to say there, because you perhaps I should just explain one thing that Julian and I are both taking as read maybe. I am not the planning authority. It is still Solihull Council of the planning authority. So they will give permission for a particular development. But I can do two things. We've already, of course, talked about what I can do to make sure brownfield development happens elsewhere, take the pressure off. But on this particular question, what we've done across the region is agree what we call our design charter. And that at the moment is voluntary. I would wish it to be incorporated in Solihull's planning framework at the next review of their plan. And that actually talks about exactly what you're talking about, Julian. What are the environmental standards that we expect any development to satisfy in terms of sustainability, for example? What we can also do, as a little build on your question, and this is, I think, a really big opportunity for us, we can also work on the whole technology around net zero homes. And actually what we have done, it's not in Solihull, but it's at Port Loop on the west side of Birmingham. We've got a development which we're funding, subsidising for a redevelopment of a long derelict site. And it's using these modern methods of construction, and the energy efficiency of the homes is wonderful compared to anything that's achieved before. And we've actually persuaded the government that we should be like the sort of test bed of their thinking about this modern methods of construction. They put a task force, a team, small team that we'll build on into Wolverhampton to develop this thinking with us. And very shortly, we'll be signing up to our first net zero home. So we can do lots of that to demonstrate good practice. But the actual planning decision rests with the individual local authority.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point when it comes to net zero home. I think that's the key, because often when Scandinavian countries look at ourselves, for example, they're all quite shocked at the building standards that we've allowed over the previous generation. And of course, obviously, as you'll probably appreciate, Solihull is the planning authority, but we can drive a very hard bargain in Solihull due to the desire for people to live here and the need for them to, therefore, developers have to effectively ensure that they go by basically what we say goes when it comes to a development, or else they don't get permission. So that's really important. Just to emphasize. Now we've got another, it's a sort of observation, but I'm going to turn it into a question, if that's okay. From a gentleman called Castuf Ray. He goes, jobs plan looks great, but I suggest you focus on students studying cybersecurity and learning how to harness artificial intelligence, one of the new realities, to avert a potential cyber war, which is based on information and data. So we need to step back from GDPR and look at government data protection acts and rules. Effectively, I think that's about the idea of ensuring that our younger people are trained up as in artificial intelligence, and also in this growing area in terms of cybersecurity, which is of great importance, particularly in an age of disinformation, and also the need that is there in order to ensure that that as mayor, that you have it in a joined up way when it comes to data and when it comes to skills and when it comes to these individuals.
So it's a brilliant point, and let me explain how this works with the colleges across the West Midlands. What we try to do is. And I'm stumbling for the name of the man who asked the question. I wanted to use his name and I've forgotten. So my apologies, sir, that I didn't retain your name. But what we do is we think about what is the economy of the West Midlands going to be like in the future? And then we think about, okay, how are we going to develop the skills that we need for that economy? And we've made quite a lot of progress on this, actually, and to Julian's point about a joined up approach. And again, I don't want to put too many things in the chat thing, but what we had is what we call our local industrial strategy, which laid out what we were going to be famous for in the future. And all these new sectors were, of course, in it. And then we take that and we work through with our colleges, well, who is actually providing what in terms of the programs that are going to be needed? And my memory is going to fail me, but I can promise you that as a consequence of that, there are a number of cybersecurity programs set up with some of our colleges for exactly this region. But it is trying to do exactly what you're saying, is trying to sort of future-proof us. And I know we're making progress. For example, when I sit down with the principal of Solihull College, brilliant college, or indeed Walsall College, another top performing college in the region, and they go through their programs, their coursework, and they say to me, look, Andy, we've changed it in this way in light of the industrial strategy as it's developing. And, you know, the boss of the Solihull College will say to me, 77% of our courses are doing this in line with your plan. And that's how we know we're actually making progress for the future. So that's how it's supposed to work. And in a sense, that's what this job's all about, to get that joining up to happen, really.
Yeah, thank you. And John O'Callaghan is a bit of a visionary, I think, in terms of Solihull College and the way in which it responds to businesses. Yeah. In your time as mayor, I've got another question coming up in a second, but very briefly, what do you think is your sort of, when it comes to skills and young people, I think we're all conscious of the way in which the pandemic is hurting the life chances of young people right now. What is your sort of sense of your greatest achievement, what you have done, what you're most proud of?
Well, you're bound to talk about what happened before the pandemic, then we'll come to what we're doing about the challenges. But actually, what I'm most proud of is that before the pandemic, for the first time ever, we got over 50% of the people in this region qualified to level 3, which is in old language a good set of A levels. So what that is saying is that every year we progressed and got better and better qualified. And why that so matters is that that is bound to affect the life chances of people in the future. And frankly, I could choose an individual course, I could choose an individual college, I could choose a university, but when you stand back from all the information, we had moved from being the worst qualified place in the whole country in 2007 in the financial crash. I mean, shameful. How had the West Midlands, the home of the Industrial Revolution, become the worst qualified place in the whole country? And we'd moved decisively away from that, and we got to over 50% of our people really well qualified. And you could then see, one other thing I'm very proud of, looking at another way, Julian, now I think about it, is we were actually, for the first time in decades, more young Londoners were moving to the West Midlands than young West Midlanders were moving to London. And we were the only place in the country with a positive brain drain. And that said so much about the opportunities here. So yeah, I was proud of that. The job was never done. There was still lots more, but we were making real progress. The brutal truth is, though, now there's 41,000 people claiming unemployment benefit who are under 24. So we have got, and that's, think about it, which industries have been worse affected by the pandemic. So now just quickly through what we've got, 20,000 opportunities in Kickstart in the region, 10,000 of these specialist college places that we've come together. We call them, not very sexy branding, we call it sector-based academies. So if you want to go into health, you want to go into digital, it's there. We've got some big retraining opportunities like our digital boot camps that I talked about. And of course, we've got our local apprentice scheme where big companies can pool their resources for small companies. So we've got massive response to the incredible challenge our young people now face.
Brilliant, Andy. I've got a question coming from a gentleman called Kyle, who says, can you tell me about your transport plans for Solihull and how those plans will directly benefit our borough?
Yes, with pleasure. So what you're probably referring to, Kyle, is my 2040 transport map, which the good news is, by the way, that is not fantasy. It is already happening. And I'll come immediately to Solihull in 1 minute, but it's already happening. I'm just going to give you one stat, Kyle, so you think about this. The year before I was mayor, the West Midlands invested £38 million in transport, peanuts. This year, just finishes, the financial year finishes at the weekend, we will have invested £277 million. So a 7-fold increase. And per head of population, we're now getting near to the London numbers. And I'm going to make a clear commitment in the manifesto. We will double it again, because each of those £277 million has had to be hunted down, largely from government, sometimes from private investors like National Express, and we will hunt down more to double it again. So it's not just a map and a pipe dream, it's genuinely happening. Now, in terms of Solihull, what's already happening for Solihull, of course, you were the pilot for the electric buses, which was great, on the number 6 along the Stratford Road. And we've now got full funding for the Coventry full electric bus town, and any of the rural routes into Coventry linking Solihull will go that way, which is great. We are now building we called it Sprint, so that got a bit of a bad name, but we're calling it the rapid bus route. We're building it out along the Coventry Road to the airport, obviously into the borough there. That's big investment. And of course, the thing that is next on our list, which is mission critical, is the extension of the metro to the north of the borough. We all know that opportunities are held back in Chelmsley Wood, and that will be again in my manifesto. We've done what we said we'd do with the Black Country, with South Birmingham, with the extension to Digbeth. The next bit is the Digbeth to Chelmsley Wood and the airport piece. And what that will do, particularly in the borough, is give a connection north-south between Chelmsley and the airport and the NEC and everything, and the HS2 station there. So that is the single biggest commitment for Solihull. Of course, continuing to protect the brilliance of the train line that goes directly out to Solihull and indeed to Shirley, two critical and actually I think high-performing lines. Refurbished rolling stock on there recently, of course, and as Julian already said, we're doing an exploration of whether we should be doing a full relocation of Solihull station as well to link it more into the town centre.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Next question comes from Jason Sohal, the Police and Crime Commissioner. Commissioner candidate.
Candidate, we hope, Julian, we hope.
Yeah, hopefully very soon. As you know, it's a bit of an obsession of mine, and there's an obsession of many of my constituents, Solihull Police Station. And Jay is obviously of the same mind as I am in terms of preventing its closure. And his question is, will you continue to hold the PCC feet to the fire on behalf of concerned residents about the need for our local community to maintain our police stations, which are necessary for a stronger local police presence to tackle acquisitive crime, which often comes into the borough from outside?
Absolutely. So thank you, Jay, for the question, and delighted to say this in front of everyone on the line. So the one-word answer is yes, in the sense I don't need to complicate it, yes, but let's just remind everyone what's at stake here. The current Police and Crime Commissioner and his Labour predecessor, we've only had Labour Police and Crime Commissioners, have closed 44 police stations across the West Midlands in 9 years. I mean, 44 police stations in 9 years. It's just a complete withdrawal. And make no bones about it, they wanted to close Solihull Police Station as well. They're now trying to trim on that. And the reason Jay asks this question as he does, what the PCC is trying, the Labour PCC is trying to do is somehow get me to be soft on this, come up with a half-baked, half solution with him. But absolutely no. He proposed the closure, and the Conservative MP, councillors, candidates for mayor and police and crime commissioner said, no, we've got to keep that station open. And there's very, very clear choice at the election coming up. Whether you want the station closed, go with the Labour plan. Or if you don't want the station closed, Jay is giving a cast iron commitment around that. And I would stand shoulder to shoulder with Jay on that, very simply because, as residents know, you need a local police presence. If you withdraw, you are, in a sense, taking away all that intel gathering, that immediacy of contact with the public. And that's just wrong for how policing should be done. So firmly with Jay on this one.
Yeah, no, it's such a huge issue for people in Solihull, because frankly, we do feel as if, although I have to say that there's obviously been extra investment in police officers in the West Midlands, but
yes,
there is a real feeling that acquisitive, violent crime, carjacking, burglary often to take cars, car parts being taken out of cars on driveways, criminal damage, those acquisitive crimes have increased exponentially in recent years. And that is because some criminals think that Solihull is a soft touch, and they think it's a soft touch because of the withdrawal of policing services. And as I've argued many times, this is not an overarching issue, because actually I and Mike Wood went in, as you well know, and negotiated the increase for a precept to give the Police and Crime Commissioner the money he wanted. And what did he do? He spent £31 million on his own head office at Lloyd House and announced the closure of Solihull Police Station while having a surplus of £106 million. He could keep Solihull Police Station open for 300 years with that money. And I find it's incredible to think of a borough of our size, of 215,000 people, being without a central police station in the town. It's a monstrous idea. Anyway, sorry, that's my hobby horse.
It's a clear choice at the election.
Yes, it is a clear choice. And you know, and unfortunately, you don't have police powers to take on the police as such. But I know exactly how you're committed towards it. We've had a few people asking about the Commonwealth Games.
Oh yeah.
I think people are just seeing the nice weather today and thinking to themselves, we've got this wonderful event coming up, which is going to really showcase our region. How do you think it's going? And do you think that it will bring the attention of the world and also, crucially, investment into our region?
Yeah, brilliant question. I actually think it's going really well. And I say that because I was up in the Alexander Stadium looking at the works only last Friday. So, and I've been to the pool at Sandwell just recently as well. So yeah, I do. But let's just be clear. I think we are actually incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity as we come out of the pandemic. When we bid for it in 2017, we thought it was going to be good for us. But actually, I feel that even more strongly now. The world is so going to want to come and celebrate something next year. Because let's be honest, the Olympics will go ahead in Tokyo this year, but they, sadly for the Japanese, will be a shadow of what was planned. If all goes to plan, this will be the first really big scale sports event, multi-sport, many countries, and it's a privilege to be hosting it. So it's a brilliant opportunity. But specifically on your questions, two things that citizens probably don't know that much about yet. We will take the opportunity to promote West Midlands businesses on the back of this. You know, everything about post-Brexit, global Britain, what have we done? We've negotiated a separate funding package with the Chancellor to give us what we call a trade promotion programme. And it's all going to be branded Road to Birmingham. I'm probably saying things I shouldn't say here. Road to Birmingham, and we will be getting out round the world, telling the world of the trading opportunities in the West Midlands. We're probably going to start, and this is definitely not public knowledge yet, at the World Expo in Dubai in the autumn. And just what a brilliant opportunity for Birmingham and the West Midlands and Solihull businesses to be leading the UK's effort, really. It's a brilliant opportunity. And then the second thing is the job opportunities that are coming through the Commonwealth Games. It's £1 billion of public money invested. Now, you don't get £1 billion coming from many things. We had to argue with the Exchequer that it was the right thing to do on the basis of a business case for the UK as a whole. But of course, because it's concentrated in the West Midlands, we are getting an incredibly good deal of that public money. And of course, it's going to pay for some jobs during the Games. But what's also happening is we're taking the opportunity to train people up with new skills that they will have for life. We're looking for about 6,000 people who do that. The Combined Authority is leading on this through our Jobs and Training Academy. And again, we're training people already in event management, sports coaching, advanced hospitality, because all that will be needed. So it's a great opportunity to get at some of the underlying issues, as well as just have a brilliant festival of sport. So I feel actually very privileged that we're going to be doing it, actually.
And will there be an opportunity for volunteers? One of the great
Yes.
things about London Olympics was the games makers. Are we going to have our own West Midlands games makers?
We are going to have our own games makers, and we're going to hopefully go one stage further in London to actually help people who do games make actually get a trained skill as well, just something they can take away as their output from it. Yeah, and we'll be making sure that local people do that. And also, by the way, it's not all public yet, but also making sure local people are able to access tickets as well to actually all participate in it. And as you know, there's lots of events in Solihull at the NEC complex. So this genuinely is something for the whole region, not just Birmingham.
Yeah, I'd like to probably have a further discussion on that opportunity in terms of ticketing, because obviously, you know, I've campaigned against many of the usury secondary ticketing outlets and how we need to ensure that basically local people can really enjoy these games, because I think it would be a crying shame if people found that their tickets had been sold elsewhere. So we really need to get on top of that. And I think that's really interesting and good that you mentioned it. We have a question about, well, sort of observation about the Gigafactory, factory technology. Obviously, what do you think? The impact on JLR is obvious, but what do you think in terms of how this will ensure that the great tradition of automotive in the West Midlands carries on into the future?
Yeah, I would say it's mission critical. And just let me explain why I think that. An electric vehicle, which we're all going to move to, the government said banning petrol and diesel cars in 2020. So we're moving to this. Julian and I would both have liked more time, not that 2030 ban, but there we are, they're doing it. So we're going to have to do it. And then the reason this is mission critical is 40% of the value of the car is in the battery. So frankly, if you don't manufacture the battery, it's going to be quite hard to get the value of the total piece. So we've got to have this. And that's why we're all working so hard to persuade the government to support us in the Gigafactory and then get the international investor to come in. But we've now announced our site. We're moving ahead on planning. It's genuinely exciting. And a piece of evidence that this matters well beyond JLR, and this comes right back to Solihull, a lovely story. You all know of the Norton motorcycle brand. It went bust. It was bought by an Indian company. And where have the Indian company decided that they're going to set up their new headquarters and manufacturing facility? In Solihull.
Yeah.
And it has been moved from, I think it was East Midlands, Nottingham or somewhere, I think, to Solihull, because they want to be part of this cluster of expertise around electric automotive in the future. So it's a brilliant local story just to prove what's been built here. So, and I think they've got their formal opening of the premises very shortly, actually. So it's a great inward investment story for Solihull.
Yeah, thank you. The perception of Solihull, quite rightly, is that it is the jewel in the crown of the West Midlands economy. However, everyone is in a difficult position right now, and going forwards, there are not going to be any easy choices. So, in that respect, do you think that trying to encourage investment in Solihull from the government, from other institutions, will actually guarantee greater bang for buck and will ensure that that halo effect that you get from Solihull's economy spreads out throughout the West Midlands? Do you see Solihull as not the first point of call, but the major point of call for investors coming into the region?
Okay, fascinating question. So it isn't just perception, Julian, that Solihull is the jewel in the economic crown. It's fact. I mean, I know you know this extremely well, but for others on the line, if you look at any of the figures about Solihull's economy, it's more like a really highly successful part of the southeast in terms of the levels of income of people. But it goes beyond that, actually. It's about the sort of levels of investment, levels of ingenuity, all those things that talk to the future as well. So it is genuinely a jewel. And pre-pandemic, it had grown, I think, over 30%, a rate of over 30% over 5 years, which of course gives all the other problems of how we actually protect the character of the place whilst we're exploring this. That's the real tricky balance. But it's an incredible economic success story. And I'm a great believer that actually careful public investment will continue to drive that forward. It's why I made the case for the government putting its money on the table for UK Central out at around the HS2 station. It just needs a bit of public money to sort of prime the private money will then come in. But of course, it's the private money that ultimately makes the success. But in terms of the strategy for the region, I've always thought that we've got to spread the wealth, of course, we know that. But there are two natural successes, the city centre and the Solihull economy. If you look at the data of the last few years, they are the two big success stories. And we've got to keep backing them whilst at the same time making more progress elsewhere. And to be truthful, Coventry's made a lot of progress in the last 5 years, and that's now emerging as well as a real success story. We've got more work to do if you look at all the data of bringing the investment into the Black Country. But I'm a great believer that you back your winners, and Solihull is definitely a winner.
Brilliant. Final question, as we're running out of time. It comes from Kim, and
yes.
She is asking about how mindful are you of the potential for traffic disruption during the construction phase of HS2, and what are you planning to do about it?
Very timely question, Kim. Do you live in Balsall Common by any chance, Kim? I know it's not Julian's constituency, but literally this very day, I've written to the chair of HS2 about the situation in Balsall Common, and we will be, myself and Saqib, the local MP, will be having a public meeting next Wednesday on this very subject. So I didn't know the question was coming tonight, but I mean, let's be clear. HS2 has got to happen. We've gone over all of that before. But right at the start, I sought from them an absolute categoric guarantee they would work with us to minimise the disruption in the construction. And on this particular issue, I do not think they're doing the right thing. And that's why I'm holding them to account and saying, come and meet the community next Wednesday. And Saqib and I will facilitate that in Balsall, well, virtually, but for Balsall Common residents next Wednesday.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And it's really good that you team up with Saqib for that. I think that's it, Andy. Any sort of final comment or remark, just in terms of, it's great to, sadly we can't have you in person in Solihull, but it's great to have you here because obviously you're a Solihull boy. I've knocked on doors of many people who know you, and they don't feel ashamed. In fact, we just had some thank yous for the discussion. And you're always, obviously, you're very much close to the heart of people in Solihull. And obviously, I wish you luck for quite obvious reasons. But is there any sort of final remarks or thoughts that you have, or anything to leave the people of Solihull with?
I won't be long, but I think probably just two things. Solihull is in my heart. I was there from the age of 7 to the age of 18, to be precise. And I'm stumbling because actually I was going to say my parents still live in the same house that I grew up in. Unfortunately, my mum died earlier this year, but my dad is still there in the same home. So it's right in my heart. And I get this fact that it's a place to be cherished. It's very different to Birmingham. And the whole thing about its growth has to be cherished in a way which respects its whole history. But it is the dynamo of the West Midlands, and we've got to make sure it continues to perform in that way. So yeah, I hope what I've done as mayor is really look after the interests of Solihull and critically make sure it does not get dominated by Birmingham, because that is not in anyone's interest. It needs its identity, it needs its special cherishing by the council and by a mayor who really understands it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And on behalf of all those who've taken part today and have sent in their questions, thank you, Andy. And also thank you, as I say, to everyone who has sent in their questions. So I think that's normally at select committee, I shout order at this point, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say thank you. Before the light fails at your camera, because it's just getting slightly darker.
That was very subtle. Sitting in the dark, have I? Dear me. Okay.
Exactly. It's not a parish council meeting. Don't worry. Look, thank you again, and good luck, and take care, and thank you to everyone. Good evening.